Setash. I'm a PhD student at Colorado State University, and we are up here in North Park, Colorado, studying ducks. So there's a couple of different intermountain basins that are high elevation throughout Colorado. Some of them are very heavily focused on agriculture, like the one we're currently in, as well as the San Luis Valley in southern Colorado. However, some of those, the water is quickly drying up, but most of it is used for agriculture. Some of it's being siphoned off towards Denver and towards other metro areas. So our questions are really about how to best maintain our state's population of breeding ducks with limited water supplies. And sorry if I'm wiping mosquitoes off me all the time, but in this system they actually flood irrigate off the rivers here. And we are currently standing right at the headwaters of the North Platte River that then goes out of here into Nebraska. So we want to see whether the meadows that are flooded for hay up here are actually useful to ducks, and if not, how can we make them more useful? What we're looking at is some of the different food that's available out here for waterfowl. We put invertebrate traps out to see the different kind of invertebrates that are in different wetland types. We've got river riparian sections like this. We've got hay meadows, ponds, and big reservoirs, as well as irrigation ditches, which siphon the water off the rivers to flood those hay meadows. And some of this hay is actually used for the horses that run the Kentucky Derby. It's like very high quality hay, but it's a super short growing season. They only get one cut of the hay typically, and that they dry it pretty early in the summer so that they can cut it. So we want to see how that affects the ducks breeding in this area. We're also looking at nesting, and we spend a lot of time walking through hay meadows, walking through riparian areas like this, and just trying to flush ducks off their nests. It's super low density around here, so we walk quite a bit, and we want to look at whether some of these flood irrigated areas can act as ecological traps for species. They might look really appealing, but they might end up being negatively influencing their nest survival and their breeding efforts throughout the summer. We have a bunch of technicians that help out on this project, and we also work with Colorado Parks and Wildlife. So we've got a few technicians back here helping us. We've got Charlie, we've got Lindsay, Ashley, and Elliot. And then we have Adam Bainey, who works with Parks and Wildlife and is an avian researcher also working on this project. So the first thing we're going to do is go set out some invertebrate traps. We've got these activity traps that we just set in the water, and they sit there for a couple days to let invertebrates go into them, but then they can't get out. And we have a bunch of different plots throughout different habitat types just to see what's available to ducks across those habitats. So I'm going to go ahead and place an invertebrate trap in this offshoot of the North Platte River. This is one of our riparian points to get at differences in invertebrate abundance across different habitat types. Okay, so we'll come back in 48 hours to check that, see what kind of inverts we have. Alright, so we're going to go take some invertebrate samples in a hay meadow on a private ranch right now. This one's a little bit wetter than the other sample that we just did, so everybody's putting on hip boots, and we're going to go set out one of our activity traps. So this is one of the activity traps, our super high-tech ones that we made. It's just a 2-liter soda bottle with the top cut off and inverted to make a funnel, and these just go right in the water and sit there for 48 hours to allow inverts to go in and not out. And we come back and collect those and store them in ethanol.
Constantly off-referencing this one right over.
Okay, and we give that 48 hours to sit there and see if North Park is growing anything other than mosquitoes for ducks to eat. We take a lot of invert points at all the different wetland habitats that North Park has to offer. We're especially interested in whether some of these flood irrigated meadows, which include hay meadows, and then also meadows that are flood irrigated for waterfowl specifically that don't get cut, whether they produce any kind of invertebrates that are of interest to ducks. So we also want to compare those to riparian areas, just ponds, and then large reservoirs that are holding water for that irrigation.
You gotta get it into your bloodstream. That's when it really works. I think it's gone.
No, remember like it had like this corner was full of sagebrush and you don't want to drag through there.
right,
Yeah.
right.
Yeah, start on the edge, like start over a little bit, but make sure you still cover the whole thing.
Oh, okay, remember.
Yep. Yeah, so we've got 3 teams going out this morning, groups of 3, 1 group of 4. And so 2 people will be dragging the rope, 1 person will be following behind, catching anything that flushes, so they can actually get like an actual point of where they flush from.
That is the best rope. Good call. I think so, yeah. Good luck!
Oh, that one's collared.
Yeah. Let me know if you want me to move at all.
We had collared ones on our refuge.
I know they were, CPW was doing it up in the mountains.
Oh. Where's the baby? This one's still kind of young to be hanging out, or like old to be hanging out.
So we just walked in about, I don't know, 500 meters or so to a nest plot. We've got a bunch of randomly selected nest plots out here on the wildlife refuge, and we're going to drag a rope between 2 people to try to see if we can flush as many duck nests or ducks off their nests as possible. It's pretty wet in here, and we saw a couple moose coming in, so we're going to have our guard up a little, and we're just going to see what we can find. It's pretty good habitat out here. There's lots of graminoid vegetation. We've got rushes and grasses and ditches running through, so it's usually a pretty decent spot to find duck nests. And we did this same nest searching day where we have a bunch of people go out and search all the plots at once, and among 15 people we found 1 nest. So that gives you an idea how low nest density is. I mean, the habitat's good, they just are pretty spread out. Ready? I know. So this plot kind of offers an example of what the historical wetlands of this area look like. We've got a little oxbow here that comes off the river. This is the Illinois River going through the refuge, and that's what most of the wetlands here used to be before people started irrigating with the water from the river. So the idea with the hay meadows that the ranchers are growing is that it offers the same kind of habitat while still being able to grow a crop. And we want to be able to see, is that helping the ducks? Are they using those hay meadows the same way that they're using this kind of habitat, like a more traditional wetland that was in this system? Okay, so this is just a good example of some of the different vegetation that we see around here. A lot of this in here is Arctic rush. Cinnamon teal specifically really love that for nesting. It's really, really dense and they can kind of like tunnel in and hide their nests really well. And it's right next to some of this timothy. That's what the ranchers grow for hay around here. So it's a nice mix of that vegetation. In the hay meadows, it's a little bit different just because you're pretty much only seeing that timothy hay. You're not getting any of the other like thicker, more dense vegetation, or some of these other wetland plants like dock here that provide some duck food as well. Careful now.
Holding it.
You might not have seen the flush, but we did just flush a canvasback hen off her nest. You can see it's over water here. I'm not going to get too close to it right yet, just because I don't want to trample the vegetation. But we'll find a way to sneak in there without disturbing the vegetation too much and count how many eggs she's got. Okay, 2, 4, 6. 6 eggs. It's this nice little platform here that's built up out of the water. There's a ton of down in it. And canvasbacks are known for having their nests parasitized, especially by redheads, and you can tell by the different colored and sized eggs in there. It looks like these ones are all canvasback eggs so far. That might change as it gets farther along. So I'm going to candle this egg to try to see how far along in incubation it is. So usually you use a tube for this. I prefer to just use my hand and make a little tube. and hold it up to the sun. And then part of that egg is pale. Right up at the top you can see the air sac that's in all eggs. And this one has a pale, like vertical line going through it, so half of it is pale and half of it is dark. And that is that tells us it's about 8 days into incubation. So we'll record that on a nest card and then go ahead and cover this back up with down so it stays nice and warm. And we also take a couple pieces of grass and just make an X over it to put on the nest so that we can tell when we return, did she abandon because of us, or did she abandon or was it depredated for other reasons? So I'll stick that on there and we'll carefully get around it and keep dragging. Okay, good to go.
I'm gonna drop the rope for 1 sec.
Now we're still gonna go to Glacier, but we're gonna go like across the top and go to Theodore Roosevelt National Park in North Dakota.
Is that where you went last? Okay, so we just got to our second plot that we're gonna drag here to look for some more nests. We dragged this a couple weeks ago and you can definitely see that the grass is quite a bit higher than it was then. It's still very wet as it was last time, so that's gonna kind of preclude some of the species from nesting out here, but we might see some more overwater nesters, and in the drier spots we might find something like gadwall or teal, maybe even mallards still. But yeah, this one's a lot more just grass. It's less of those oxbow wetlands that we saw on the last plot, and there might be some greasewood in here as well. Not a lot in this plot. In fact, nothing, which is not entirely unexpected. Oh my goodness, this bug swarm. Yeah, we just finished our second plot and no duck nests, but we've got one more to search today, and we'll see what that one holds.
This is NS23. It looks a lot drier than the last two that we've been on. There's a lot more greasewood, a lot more shorter, dry, dead grass already, but still good habitat 'cause it's still long and a lot of old growth in it as well.
So we just finished our third plot and our final plot that we're going to search today, and we did not find any nests in this one. But I just want to talk a little bit about how these data are going to be used and analyzed. We search these plots a couple times so we can kind of estimate nest density within those plots, and then we use all the nests that we find to estimate how many of those nests are successful, nest survival essentially, which we define as the probability that at least one egg hatches in a nest. And we also want to just look at whether we're finding those nests in habitats that line up with the invertebrates that we find, like when there are those pulses in resources, and yeah, just whether they're using each different habitat type and in proportion to its availability out here, as well as which ones are most consistent with higher nest survival. So we're gonna go check on a canvasback nest that the crew found just about a week ago. They haven't checked it since then, so we want to see, is the hen still there? Does she have any additional eggs from last time, and candle those eggs to see what stage she is at in incubation.
Did somebody else with binoculars keep an eye out for when she flushes, because I didn't bring mine.
Or say you were wrong.
That was wrong. Come on, where are you?
Oh, there's this
It's not gone! And there's definitely more than one type of egg in here. Dude, I love canvasback. It's so cool.
Alright, so we're gonna candle some of these eggs just to see what incubation stage they're at. You can see, let me hold this for 1 second. There's two different color eggs in here. This greenish one and then this like lighter beige one. So this is what probably a redhead egg and this is a canvasback egg. So this nest has been parasitized. So we want to look first at the canvasback egg. Just kind of point it up at the light using the tube to block all the light around it and see if we can see any light coming through there. I don't personally like to use the tube because I think it's a little too light, but when I do this, I can see like a vertical line down there. So half of it is light colored and like translucent and half of it is pretty dark. So that tells us it's probably around 8 or so days of incubation. We've got a little chart on here, I don't know if you can see it, but it shows like the shadowing in the egg that corresponds to each incubation date. So I'm seeing like right in here where it's like a vertical line right down.
Yes.
So we'll just put these back in here and cover it back up with down.
You want to put a grass X on it again?
Yeah. You got one?
Just create one.
And we'll cover it up with a grass X just so we know whether she came back to the nest, whether we caused her to abandon it, or whether something else got to it if it fails. And hopefully in the near future we will see some canvasback ducklings.
Cool.
Cool. Good to go. So we're just going to fill out a nest card for the canvasback nest we just found. We just write down how many eggs were in there, how far along into incubation she was, and whether we placed that grass X over it so we can make sure we know whether we affected it the next time we come to check it. But we'll just fill out a new row of this every time we go and check a nest, and that way we can tell how many times we visited it and how far into incubation it was every time, so we can kind of start to calculate when we expect that nest to hatch. And once it does hatch, we take vegetation information on it. So it's really important for us to know, even if it fails, when was it supposed to hatch, so we know how far along in the season it initiated and what the vegetation looked like when it did initiate that nest. So we're here on one of the ranches that we have access to try to find duck nests, and luckily we've got this access because Ducks Unlimited has worked with them to restore a reservoir that's actually up in the hills behind the property. They use that water to continue irrigating even in drought years, and Ducks Unlimited went in and cleared out the outflow for that, so they were able to continue using that water. They use that to flood hay meadows like this. You can see some of the irrigation ditches running through here, and these are the meadows that we're searching to see whether ducks are actually using them. And we also want to know, if they're not using them, how can we make properties like this more useful? These properties prevent these areas from being developed and being developed into little 40-acre plots, and they allow this habitat to exist. So we want to know, even if the hay meadows are not beneficial for ducks, what can we do to make them more beneficial? Whether it's storing water in little ponds so the ducks have some more residual vegetation from the previous year, or just continuing to not cut along the irrigation ditches, or just keeping the irrigation ditches filled with water so they can use those as kind of little highways to move around North Park. That's really what we're looking at on some of these ranches, and we are very lucky to have access to them, especially this one. Alright, so we just wrapped up the day searching for nests on the wildlife refuge. We just got back over to the refuge headquarters. Feel free to like this video and follow along and subscribe. If you want to continue following along with my own research, you can follow me on Instagram or Twitter. It's at conservationcasey. And if you want to stay tuned for what we're going to be doing with invertebrates on this project, come along to the next video.